I'm a composer. My name is Arthur Kampela. I have, I did my doctorate at Columbia University. I think the role of a composer, that was the reason that I was called, I think by Sharon to come here, because I think that independent of all my theoretical approach and my thinking about music, which I would like to talk briefly here, because I cannot go long talking that, I would like also to show certain techniques that I use. And this discussion that was just now taking place here in terms of Xenakis thinking, it's a fundamental thing. Fundamental thing is a good bridge for me to start talking about my vision of music, my conception of music. Excuse me, normal chair, not this guitar. Sorry about that. So, what is important for me to briefly say is that my approach to composition is an approach that has to do with my dialogue and my dialogue with many types of procedures and composers. Of course, one of the composers that it's mostly guided my ideas, research is Xenakis. And it's exactly because of his type of thinking that I could start to bounce against this type of thinking as a composer, and to and this bouncing illuminate my type of research, for example, which I will quickly say. So the basic idea, just to pick up from where you left in the discussion, while Xenakis is a composer whose conceptual thinking is pretty much on the is a mainstream of his music. In other words, he's capable of writing chords, of writing situations, as Lachemann would say, situations where the interpreter would have to struggle. And struggle is a very important characteristic of the music of the 20th century. Since the beginning of the 20th century, you can have struggle as a compositional idea with Sorabji, for example. Sorabji is a composer from Indian descent from the beginning of the century that pushes the threshold of rhythmic implications and have enormous works that are still impossible to think. This idea of impossibility is something that always guided me, and so I will get there. But in terms of Xenakis, for example, the idea of processes, the accumulations of processes, and the idea of overlapping gestalts. It's something that is very important for me. However, when I was confronted by not only Xenakis, but for example Sorabji, or for that matter Ferneyhough, in the sense, because I study with Ferneyhough too, in the sense that you always push your compositional thinking to a certain threshold, and with Ferneyhough, he even say that is the difficulty. The idea again of the struggle is the difficulty of his writing models that propels the outcome of the music somehow. So this idea of difficulty is all in one sense appealed to me, and the other sense bothered me. So when I was at Columbia, I started to think about how certain rhythms, certain gestures. I started to, first of all, as a composer and instrumentalist, my thinking departed from not only conceptual visions. In other words, how can I, commit to a certain posture, a certain static, but how, the very how of things, how things are possibly done. So I started to think in terms of rhythm, and I started to think in terms of extended techniques and new techniques that I could use. And in this sense, I also thought, because also of this impossibility of performing certain things, that and this is the negative dialectics of Xenakis in relation of me. Because of this, I started to think about ways that ergonomic considerations will be a fundamental role in portraying compositional thinking. So for me, when I compose something, I not, for example, I knew about this thing about many composers do have this on the closet string quartet, the mute string quartet. I do have a real string quartet. I do have any instrument you can imagine, percussions, and because it's necessary for me, to have hands-on on the material. Now, this doesn't limit myself because when I sit with my score, I have a huge score. In fact, I brought my piece Anthropophagia, which was played by the Kammerensemble New Music Berlin some time ago, and Macunaíma, which is recently played by the New York Philharmonic, where I deal with all these two things: rhythmic implications and ergonomic implications. How do they fit together? And this thought was only possible for me because of this bouncing and dialoguing against principally a guy who influenced me in terms of sound processes and vision, which was Xenakis. So in that sense, when I was talking with Sharon, I thought that it would be interesting for me to exemplify some of this balance. And I would like to show when I was working. So let me see if I can. For example, let me see if I have a better an explanation. There's one here. Okay, this is kind of like when I was working with rhythm, for example, I started to wonder about the idea of ratios, how ratios interact. And one of my first insights is that no matter what you do, suppose you are a jazz drummer, no matter what you do and the rhythms that spill out from your playing, the next one will always be connected to whatever you did before, somehow. There is an inner connection between those rhythms. It's an impossibility, in fact, is an axiomatic impossibility. The fact that one rhythm will simply, giving the gravity, pressure, and ambient that you are, then one rhythm will go out. So, for example, to be very musical, if you play something like this is a cell that comes from just what I said right now, and even the ear around that. But what I'm saying is that I started to derive rhythm in this rhizomatic process, much influenced by the ideas of how many rhythms would interact and what is this that is the music figure. There is a very important article by Ferneyhough that influenced me in this thinking, which is like Il tempo della figura, which he questions the figure as as a totality. He said the figure is not a monad that is like stuck in itself. The 16th note is the 16th note, depending on the tempo, depending on the variables that you have, metronome marking variables, etc. So this is a very simple example, and I further that, and I would show you a simple consequence. But this example is that I perceive that the people, for example, of the new complexity school or schools that try to deal with mathematical outcomes, they are very hooked into the isolation of this deterministic and probabilistic variables. And as Xenakis very well knew, I recently had saw this interview with Halbrecht, that Xenakis very well knew that all variables are interlinked. So when I started to work with this, basically, I perceived that, for example, I wanted to understand how rhythm unfolds. So in this very simple example here, you have a ratio of 5/6 and a ratio of 5 in times of 4 and 6 in times of 4, for example. And what was important is that to start to understand how these little units would subdivide itself and would maintain the same speed between two different types of configurations. Of course, these configurations are running through a specific quarter note here. But for example, a simple discovery, which is mathematically irrelevant, is that if you apply commutative and associative properties to the musical material, and if you twist the 5-4-6-4, 6-4, 5-4, you end up getting can create many layers and processual thinking because of this. So if I wanted even to create more complications then, so basically this is the way that simply it shows, for example, for the 5 times of 4, so 4 divided by 5, and then to divide the 4 16 nodes of this, creating a 1 16 node, one quarter node, this will divide by 6. Then I will have the same relationship with the 6 because so the first step was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we'll do 1, this will be the same string of speed, this underneath it. And this is what people in the new complexity school didn't know, didn't grasp, because they were dealing with rhythm in a deterministic way. So we can 5 times of 7, 7 times of 9, whatever, and then how do they link? How do they reach the rhythm? So what is this that brings us? So this informed a lot. And this, but I wasn't just happy with this type of discovery. What I needed to do is because much influence, of course, by certain thinking, this idea of struggle that comes from Torabji, Xenakis, principally for me, and of course, somebody said Varese, of course, but Xenakis, because Xenakis has the idea of processes, and this attracts me a lot. The probabilistic intermingle of situations. This is another word that comes also from Latin. And the struggle to deal with this type of rhythm, I had to discover ways that you give, at least to the interpreter, an idea of what links cell A to cell B. So this can be immensely more complex if you create new like, for example, if I know, if you show this to an interpreter, just show this. You normally, and this is a very simple example, I show you better one, but you will never know that this 16 nodes here have the same speed of the other. Therefore, if I want to create a very crazy subdivision, another subdivision like this one here, for example, which is a consequence of this material, I could go on and explain this for many hours, but I don't have the time. I don't want to build to play. And I want to show some things too. I will have, 1 second, please. Oh, this. For example, some rhythmic possibilities. For example, using the first example again, just to come back, I could also create this other chain of events that is that normally people wouldn't know, and this can be even furthered. So, in other words, in here I have the same equivalences between these two processes, and then I know that this was 1, 2, 3, pa pa pa. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, ta 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 next. 1, 2, 3, ta 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 ta. So I enter underneath the ratio and I go out of the ratio. This is one way to understand the ratio relationship and the way rhythms unfold. So because of this detail, I would understand that if I do another ratio that is like say 7 times of 5 of these nodes, they not only will be crossing between two different configurations, but they will be also amplifying themselves. They will put 7 nodes in times of 5, and 5 nodes that has, and the next node is exactly falling in here, in this one. It's a pretty complicated thing to grasp, and this is a rhythm that is pretty complex. So more than that, here I'm working with, and there is a way to demonstrate that. I don't have the time to do so, but I here am doing two types of ratios to configuration 6-4 and 7-4. They're under the same, let's say, no mark, let's say 60 here. And then if I want, I could also amplify this or create a more, yes, here. In this example. Sorry. It has to be down. For me, it's here in the screen, but the screen, I have to bring it up. No. Page 27, right? Yes, this page. Pardon me. $25. Here. Okay, I hope it's correct now. Yeah, it's the same example as before. But this time I abstract a little bit the possibilities here. For example, here we have a 5/16 measure, and in this measure I get the 5/16 nodes and it's divided by 7. So I have this first, what I call the first degree of relationships. So 7 times 5. So if I have 5 nodes, 1, 2, 3, 4 will be my metronome. So if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So papa, next. Now I discovered that this guy, let's say, is in 65. So if I multiply 65 by 7, you divide by 5, it's going to give me metronome marking 91. So another relationship that people do not know, or it is impossible for them to know, is that 70 times 5, this is a Carter type of measure modulation. 65 goes to measure 91. If you get 7 times 5 and 65, then one of those little nodes here get in the same speed as a normal node, a non-contracted node in 91. So knowing about this, I can not only do that, but I can run and start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this node, run another relationship, 11 times of 6, that uses 6 of those nodes that have the same speed, like if you were in a normal section, and but 11 only. So then I go back to this, so if I go down, and then this is a way to at least orient the person. Those types of relationships are not clear, are not in your page, nobody knows about them. So this type of research, like ratios and accumulation of ratios, is somehow a research that can, I think that I have to quit, right? Okay, so it's better for me to just go through. So to wrap it up, this is my end at that point. So my very universe of music is a universe that deals with 2 types of material, basically. You're not going to manipulate on these. It's a material that plays, they'll deal with noises, and I like guys, of course, I will demonstrate. So, like Xenakis, for example, have many types of. So I have pieces that will use stuff like that. And so virtuosity, in my case, is something that is one more step, and you need to say I would use all the Paganini possibilities a little more, if possible, in terms of like, because that's the way we stretch instrumental thinking somehow, because we have to understand the instrument. And one thing, the last thing about Xenakis in the book, in the video, very interesting because he said he never used the electronic and acoustic. He likes to be just separated. Xenakis has the separation between the truly unique, in the piece that am I right? There are exceptions there. Later, I think that for me, independent of that, his electronic thinking is for me is like can convey all the conceptual things for like Parmesan, for example, another guy that is very particularly electronic in the electronic realm. But I don't want to extend my things and go on and speak to these days or whatever. But so I have here Bill Anderson that was kind enough to come and perform one piece that is exactly this paradigm of virtuosity, and he's gonna play a piece that is done for the guitar, but I did for the viola and the electronic. So it has some kind of relationship with, I think, with the things that I was dealing with here, bouncing off the idea of successful thinking that I hope you enjoy.
I'll play it quickly because I don't find any juice with the amp.
Okay, let me just check the volume and let's go. Volume.